every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
You need the right people in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you have the right people in the right place, but at the wrong time.
I've got to keep going forward. I've got to keep looking for revenue streams. I've got to keep looking for growth, keep looking at new ways of doing things.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling a business is not necessarily that easy. If it were, we wouldn't have the vast majority of businesses remaining below 10 employees. However, there are some sound principles of successfully scaling a business, and the really good news is that those principles are intrinsically linked with building a valuable business. So that means that if we're building a scalable business, then we're also building a valuable business. If you'd like to understand more about those principles and access a range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey, then why not take a look at www.bizsmarts.co.uk. That's BizSmarts, BIZSMARTS.
On this week's episode of ScaleUp Radio, I am joined by Lynsey Le Keux. Lynsey is the owner of Le Keux Vintage, a specialist vintage event company, and they offer experience events themed around the 1950s, right the way through from makeup and hairstyles to full-blown time warp experience packages that embody everything that we know and love about 1950s America. Think American diners, Happy Days, Grease, rock and roll, that kind of thing. And Lynsey started Le Keux Vintage back in 2007, and like many startup businesses, this was supported initially by Lynsey having a full-time day job and then working evenings and night times, taking backdrops and various props to clients' houses and other venues before Lynsey took the plunge and went full-time with her business. And over the years, Lynsey has extended her business model to include their own venues for themed parties and events, full makeovers, a range of vintage cosmetic products on a subscription basis, and latterly into offering Le Keux franchises. So join me and Lynsey as we explore the highs and lows of her scale-up journey so far, and we discuss the key milestones and challenges along the way, where she's got things right and where she feels she didn't, and that includes a discussion around the decision to franchise the business and the ins and outs of that. Every business owner's story is different, and Lynsey speaks so candidly and eloquently about her scale-up journey and offers some real insight for us into the opportunities and challenges that we all face along the way. And there are some great takeaways for all of us, no matter what stage or what type of business we are running. So let's go across to Lynsey for her story. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here with Lynsey Le Keux of Le Keux Vintage. So Lynsey, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic to have you on board. I'm dying to hear everything about what you do. It looks like a fascinating business. So Lynsey Le Keux Vintage, what is that? What do you do?
So we are what I would describe as a one-stop shop for all kind of vintage events, experiences and beauty. So we have venues, they're kind of fabulous 50s themed venues with lots of things all under one roof. We have a vintage makeover salon, beauty parlor, hair salon. We do pin-up photo shoots. So the whole venue set up like sets. So it's kind of like walking into Greece, we've got beauty school dropout, we've got the diner. Yeah, we have like a milkshake bar, shopping all the way throughout the venue. We have beauty rooms. So we have people come in and do beauty treatments and nails and things like that, as well as having event spaces. So we do a lot of hen parties, birthday parties, reunions. We hire out the venue a lot for things like photo shoots and filming. Yeah, so it's all designed to give you a little slice of vintage, like walking into another little world all in one go. All your senses are kind of treated to beautiful bright colours and fantastic music and the smell of milkshakes and hairspray and all that sort of thing. And then the business kind of goes beyond that a little bit. I have a cosmetics range and hair product and accessories range. So we sell that in the salons, but we also distribute it online and through suppliers and wholesalers and boutiques and through a subscription parcel that goes out monthly to people who love vintage and want to create that look at home. So we do everything, but it's all under the vintage theme.
Sounds absolutely amazing. So can you give us a feel for the size, the scale of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I started as a mobile business offering event services across the country, and that kind of grew into a pop-up store, and that grew into a permanent venue, and then we tripled our square footage in 2014, so we took over the unit next door at the Custard Factory in Birmingham, and then began franchising. So currently we have one franchise branch in Essex in Leigh-on-Sea, and I can't say too much, but a few more in the pipeline at the moment. So franchising is definitely one of my real kind of scale up goals going forward, and to bring a Le Keux Vintage branch to all the major cities and towns across the UK. Yeah, so in terms of size, really it's the branch numbers growing, and the cosmetics range as well. Started with a couple of products, and now we've got 20 odd different individual items in the range, and that's growing, you know, with new products coming out every few months. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. So quite some significant scale, and certainly a journey that you've already outlined in brief there, and we'll explore that in a little bit more in a moment. So significant journey from when you started. When did you start, by the way? What
officially went full-time into the business in 2010, so I've been doing it 12 years now, but really I started it late 2007, almost like a hobby. I always wanted my own business, so I knew where I wanted to take it, but it was very much, you know, 9 to 5 in my job, and then it slowly built while I was in a full-time job. So obviously one had to go, and I took the leap and quit the job.
Fantastic. And what got you into it in the first place? I mean, you know, it's not the sort of thing that necessarily I would have thought of myself and got into. What got you into doing it in the first place?
Well, I don't think I can really take credit for having the exact vision of what the business looks like now. Back when I first kind of conceived things in 2007, when I first started, I tried to do wedding planning. I used to be in project management. I used to do business process re-engineering and things like that. But what I really wanted to be was an event organizer. And there's a little bit of crossover with project management there. I've always been quite organized and liked bringing things together. So that was always the goal at the start. And very much the first guise of the business was called Le Keux Events. It wasn't themed vintage, but what I soon realized was I was accidentally doing a lot of vintage events, and then sort of realized, oh, that's obviously interesting me. I enjoy that. No one else was doing anything like it at the time. It's certainly much more of an industry now than it was back then. Okay. But yeah, that's essentially it. I kind of started doing events, and then it turned into the business model it is now, because for example, I would organise ticketed burlesque nights, you know, burlesque dance, which is very inspired by, you know, the vintage era. And customers would come to me and say, well, I'd quite like my hair doing like the burlesque artists have. I'd quite like to learn burlesque. So those evening events became a day. So customers would be offered a ticket for the evening event, or they could have a bundle ticket and they could come and have a dance class before, and then they could learn how to do their hair or get their hair and makeup done at a pop-up salon at their event. And I sort of started to grow this multi-faceted kind of offering, and it went from there really. And then I added photo shoots, and all the elements that you see now were slowly added on, a lot through response to demand really. And then I used to subcontract those bits out, and then over time brought them in-house, because obviously it was more profitable for us to do that, and took on staff to do it as opposed to paying outside companies to do it. And that's how it kind of merged into what it is now.
So how many staff have you got roughly?
Well, we've got a small core team. So we have like in the Birmingham branch, a venue supervisor and bookings coordinator and myself. And then we have the rest of our team are freelancers. Yep. So we do have marketing support as well. I tend to be interns and short-term contracts and a few subcontractors and that sort of thing in marketing. But yeah, the rest of our team are all freelancers. So they come in and out as and when we need them. That can be hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, dance tutors, whatever we require really to deliver the events.
Great. And from the business model perspective, then it sounds like you've got different packages that you've now put together then. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, and is that structured in a way that it's essentially for this amount of money you get these services? How does that?
It's essentially like a menu. We allow it's a sort of pick and mix menu type thing.
Right.
We can say if someone wants to come to us and have an event, we'll say these are all the different things that you can build up your event with, and then they'll say we'd like to have a bit of a makeover, and then can we have a dance class, can we have afternoon tea or cocktails or whatever, and then they pay per person for each one of those events. It's really flexible, and they build their own event basically. Yeah.
And then you've built in then the recurring revenue model essentially around your cosmetic ranges and the other things that they can then get on a subscription basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it came about a few years after having the makeup range and the cosmetics, and sort of didn't think it would ever take off or be a core thing. I thought, oh, who'd want to do that? You know, you kind of question that, don't you? And then gave it a go, and it's really developed over the years. We used to just pop a few bits in an envelope and it was on a much smaller scale. Now we have beautifully branded boxes with much more contents in them. The price has gone up a little bit, but it's still really good value, and our customers love it because they can collect our entire range at a fraction of the price. And for us, like you say, it's that guaranteed revenue coming in each month, which is brilliant, and that in itself helps us then invest in more products for the range, and it cycles us up without having to take outside investment. You know, I've never taken investment for the business. I've always reinvested profit in growth. So that model certainly helps us to do that as well.
Brilliant. No, that sounds absolutely excellent. So you mentioned competition when you started. There wasn't really anybody else doing the kind of the more vintage side of things. I guess is what you're saying. What's the landscape like now? There's so many things in there that sounds like you probably are differentiated from everybody else that's out there. So what is your competition now, and how do you stack up?
Yeah, so our competition is really we have competition for our different income streams. So there are other people who offer vintage hair and makeup services. There are photo shoot studios who might do a vintage theme offering as well. Obviously, people who do afternoon tea, hotels and all that, and then hen party activities. To this day, and hopefully it will remain that way, I cannot find a single person who does everything that we do under one roof. We are the only one I can find. And I think that certainly really works for my franchise offering, because my franchisees can potentially take on a business model where, you know, they don't have a direct competitor for everything we do. And I really feel like we differentiate ourselves from our competitors, specifically probably more in the salon and photo shoot area. And that's great. And they totally, you know, do a great job for their customers. But for us, we offer a bit of a bigger kind of offering for our customers, a lot more reassurance, because typically that industry is kind of like a one-man band thing. So especially we do a lot of wedding hair and makeup, and we get a lot of customers come to us and say, I was let down by my hairdresser. Whereas we've got a team of 20 who, you know, for any reason, especially when COVID was obviously people having to test constantly, and especially when you're in close contact like we are with clients, you know, they'd say, my stylist has got COVID, or even if we had someone with COVID in our team, or for whatever reason are incapacitated on that day, we can then go out to our wider team. So, you know, things like that, where the bride knows that, okay, my original stylist might not be available, but Le Keux have a team, they have a backup. I'm not going to be let down on my wedding day. And I think that's the kind of thing that differentiates ourselves from those competitors in our income streams, is because we're a bit of a bigger operation and we can handle things in that way a bit better.
And it's that start to finish kind of whole experience then, isn't it, as well, on top
Absolutely. Yeah, we pride ourselves in really kind of professional booking process, which probably differentiates quite a lot from probably something that's a lot less formal in our competitors. But for us, that I think really reassures customers and makes them feel really confident in us. And customer service is just the absolute core of everything in our business. It's the customer experience. And that's a huge part of my job as the owner, is to delegate that, is to teach and train our team, and to make sure that everybody that our customers come in contact with truly understands what that customer journey is and how to make it amazing. And, you know, everything, our KPIs, our metrics, everything is actually around customer service.
Okay.
Because if we get that right, everything else falls after that in our industry. And specifically because we are dealing with a lot of our customers are celebrating often once in a lifetime events like weddings, hen parties, 50th birthdays, whatever it is. And they're very emotional and they're very important to the customer. You only do that once, and we're not going to mess up for them. And we want it to be amazing and really a truly emotionally elevating experience for them. So that's a real focus for us.
So you track then that customer experience after every event that you do, essentially. Is that right? How do you do that?
We have a customer journey kind of map that's laid out, so everybody gets trained in that, and it's certainly got measures in there to make sure that we know we're doing a great job for the customer, and that's how we know we're successful if we have done X, Y, and Z by a certain time, or that they've been asked certain questions, etc. So all of that is there, and then we have a loop. Every customer gets sent an independent survey to fill out to tell us how it's done by our bookings coordinator. So we get that feedback direct from the customer, and especially that's important to me because as the business has grown, as you can imagine, I'm not on site. I'm not overseeing all those staff anymore. And the biggest challenge when you grow your business is going from me being there every day and personally managing every individual who has contact with our customers to me being there once a week and delegating that to layers of people who then have to delegate that down. And standards do drop when you have to go through that transition. So the big challenge for us is having a process in place so that we don't let our customers down, even if I'm not personally there to oversee that. And that's what we try to do. And it works most of the time.
Excellent. Well, let's go back to the beginning, and then let's see if we can pick out some of the key milestones and key things that the challenges, maybe the things you got right and the things that maybe you didn't get right that you might do differently. So let's go right back then to when you were setting up those mobile events. So take us back to there, and then what how did that get going, and what was the biggest challenge around that, and then maybe get into the next step.
Yeah, sure. Well, I remember, like I said, I tried to do wedding planning and sort of realized that certainly the way I was going about, I wasn't getting any business in it. I did a few little ones, but it's very labor intensive. And you do it for a percentage of the wedding budget, and unless you're really getting those £1 million weddings, you're probably never going to make a certain amount of money. I'm sure there's people out there who do really well in wedding planning, but for me, because of the background I came from in the business that I'd done in the past, in more like the business process re-engineering, things like that, I always had scaling up in my mind. I didn't want a business that was around what my time could deliver. Does that make sense? Like a transactional business in that sense. For me, I always wanted a business that I could scale up and grow, and it wouldn't be all reliant on me. So that was always in my mind. So wedding planning wasn't for me. So I decided, right, we're going to do events. And I remember when I decided to start advertising hen parties, for example, even mobile, it took 7 months to get the first booking. 7 months. So it really gives you an idea of, even though we get hen party inquiries in most days now, that's how it takes so long sometimes. But I didn't give up. And then the mobile really was me. My sister joined the business. She helped me out at the weekends. She's really, really creative and ended up being in the business for quite some time. And some freelancers, we would go to people's houses and we would do hair and makeup and photography and take afternoon tea to them and take crockery to them and build sets in their houses to take photo shoots, so I took vintage props with us, and it was great, and it really established a business, but it was quite labor intensive and really exhausting because I had a full-time job at the same time. And then my husband and I took a trip around Route 66 and going to all of those amazing, like staying in the gorgeous little hotels, the motels, I should say, and also the soda shops and the diners. I just fell in love with the aesthetic. I was like, I want to recreate that in England, because yes, we do have American diners in England, but that whole, my business was more on the kind of beauty and hair side and makeovers and photo shoots. I was like, we need to recreate this. So I kind of negotiated a short kind of pop-up lease with the custard factory where we still are now, many years ago, and that was in 2010, and that's how the business first started. And that's when I quit my main job as well. I thought, well, I've got to run this venue, so I'm going to do it hand in hand like that. And I decided, for me, having a place, I thought, I've got to build somewhere that they'll come to, because like I say, it's exhausting traveling, taking everything. You get paid for the job, but the prep and the bit afterwards of putting everything away and sorting everything out, you don't get paid very much when you think about it like that. And I'm sure anyone out there listening in events totally appreciates the amount of effort that goes into setting up off-site. So I really wanted something that they would come to, and that fit with the wanting to scale up model, because it was somewhere people could come to and that I could have staff in, and that luckily worked. So then I took on a permanent lease and kind of moved around different units and tried different things and ended up where we are now. That was the kind of journey.
So what gave you the confidence, do you think, then to take on a lease then at the custard factory to take on those additional overheads? Because up to that point, I guess it was essentially you got a bit of equipment, a bit of kit that you had to cart around, but really everything else was then just you get paid and you got a few costs to get there, but essentially it's all variable, isn't it? Now you're taking on a fairly chunky lease, probably. What gave you the confidence to be able to do that?
Well, I did remember at the time, I don't really know how looking back now, because I don't really know what I was doing with leases. I know a bit more now, but I did negotiate quite a good deal with them. So I think it wasn't too high in the first instance, and they were quite flexible. They're, essentially it's a private landlord, so it's much easier process than taking on a lease with a kind of corporate building block, something like that. I think for me, I never thought of it as courage necessarily. It was, I just always wanted to have my own business, so it was just a no-brainer, and I absolutely wanted to do it, so I did it. Right. I'm a bit stubborn like that, I think. So yeah, I think that's probably the answer. But I equally had tested it. I knew there was demand, and I knew I could grow it. And I feel like if I've got the time and focus to put on something, and I have got some proof in that working, then I'll just go for it. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't. But I do very much have the mindset that there is no quitting. You make it work. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yes, there is no try, do or don't do, or whatever Yoda says, or something like that. That's it, exactly. Funnily enough, I heard that quote the other day. That's funny. True, yeah. Yeah, good. All right. So how did you go about filling the venue then? From a lead generation aspect, getting new clients, what worked for you? How did you go about doing that? Well, I have to say, early on in the business, I did not spend much at all on marketing. I did a lot of marketing kind of on foot, in the sense that we would go out to vintage events and have stalls, and we would leaflet them heavily. So that definitely works. So we were just really targeting our actual market. I did used to do a bit of print advertising, and I did, there was one magazine at the time that went out, it was the only vintage themed magazine, Vintage Life it was called, and we had a really good relationship right from the start with the people who edited that, and I had a column in it, and they would really heavily promote us through that. So we kind of got quite well known in the industry quite early on, and there weren't, like I say, wasn't many names in that. So we, like I say, go to festivals, and within that community became known. And then luckily as well, I think timing wise, 2008, 9, 10, whenever, I can't remember specifically when we started our social media pages, but it was certainly at a time where it was actually quite easy to grow your pages. Right. So Facebook grew quite quickly and quite easily. It's not like that now. They've stamped down massively on businesses growing their pages. So I know that from new franchisees, they might take them a year or two to get up to 1,000 followers on Facebook, whereas, maybe we're at 10,000 then. I can't remember the specific times and date, but that certainly was massive. It was very easy for us to get traction on social media. We would put an event out on Facebook and it would fill up. It felt quite easy to use social media. So yeah, I think that was really how we, in inverted commas, generated leads or got customers to us. It's changed over the years, and we've had to get a bit cleverer, and we've had to get a bit more complex in our marketing, and we do more what I would call now lead generation activities, and that's probably come from more business experience on my side. Starting the business, I would have never called it that or known it was that. I just how do I get a booking, Yeah. That's it. But I've learned a lot more over the years, and like I say, we have more of a strategy now. What sort of things work for you? I'm always interested in, I think other businesses are interested to hear what marketing activities work and what don't. Yeah, so we definitely still use a lot of social media, even though it's harder to grow those accounts. What we do have is good in terms of following and engagement. So yeah, we absolutely do get business through that. Like I say, word of mouth is massive for us, and that again comes from the customer experience.
Yep.
So a lot of bookings that we get, they do say, oh, my friend came to you, I saw on Facebook that my friend had a hen party at yours, and now I'm organising my friends. You know, that happens a lot. So we do get a lot through that. We also, in terms of our location in Birmingham, we have huge windows out onto a very busy street. So we do get some business obviously through just awareness that way. But in terms of, you know, going beyond that in the recent years, we've really figured out, since social media has gotten a lot harder to get reach on. So, you know, we might have 33,000 followers on Facebook. You might get 200 people actually see that post. You know, it's bonkers how much it's reduced. So you can't rely on that for the same you know, reach that you used to. But what we have learned is that converting individuals from our social media following onto an email list, and then further categorizing their interests within that email list and only targeting those on, you know, so it's not to spam them onto too much stuff, that moving them onto the mailing list and marketing through email has some success rate as well. It's still tough, it's still not easy, but we do that. So we do a lot of brand collaborations to kind of leverage other brands who've got significantly more following than us. We'll do joint competitions, or you know, we put together online quizzes where, to get the answer, you put your email address in and they will do it with us, and you know, things like that, where, like I say, I'd class as a little bit more sort of smart and complex marketing strategies. That certainly helps me grow more of the online sales as well. Of course, the branches, it's quite local, even though we do get people come from all over the country. But yeah, certainly for online sales, you know, getting leads through vintage interest online is definitely helpful for that.
Brilliant. Okay, good. So what would you say were some of the key challenges so far along your journey?
Growth comes with it. Well, when you're in a very, very personal client contact business and you're growing, you have to find the right people to replace yourself in the business. And that is unequivocally the most difficult challenge I've had, and to this day not solved. I have a great team, don't get me wrong, but you know, can anyone really do what you do in the business? And whereas at the start I was the owner, I was the operator, I was the manager, I was the doer, and that had its place. But like I say, I've always had ambition to grow and scale the business, so you can't be that person if you want to grow the business and do other things. You have to move past that and delegate. And I've gotten to the point where I have absolutely no problem delegating that. Like, I don't want control over any of it. I'm like, do it, please. But it's, you know, it's finding the right people, and we're very niche. And it's not just a person with capabilities, it's a person with the right personality, person who wants to dress and look vintage. You know, that really narrows your market down massively for a member of staff, you know, massively. But it's part of the job, you know. I always say to my team, you know, think about it like Disney. You don't go to Disneyland and you see Snow White with a wonky wig having a cigarette on the back of the thing. So we don't get that in Le Keux either. Someone comes through the door and we are these perfect little vintage experiences, and ourselves, you know, we represent the brand. We have our hair and makeup that way, we dress that way, because it enhances the experience, and customers love to see us like that. But you have to have members of staff who are passionate and want to present themselves in that, because it takes time, you know. So we being in a niche like that, we do have a challenge to continuously, you know, keep a team up to that standard. So yeah, that's definitely a big challenge, part of it. Originally when I wanted to grow, franchising was not something I considered or really knew a great deal about, and I decided to open my own second branch. So I had a second branch of my own in Leeds.
Okay.
And my sister lived in Leeds at the time. It was the perfect destination for us because it's another big hen party city like Birmingham, and she lived there, and she'd been working freelance in the business for me for a while, and she ran that successfully for 5 years, and it was great. And she decided she wanted to move on to other things. She's always been a graphic designer and wanted to go back to that, really, and she sort of become an event manager and everything else, and that was absolutely fine. And we came to the end of the lease, so I sort of took a decision point then to say, you know, do I bring in someone else into that branch? And it's actually it's easy having a second branch when a family member's running it to a certain extent, because you have that implicit trust in them. They're not going to let you down, not going anywhere, and we're very close and still are. And so we had that was great. But bringing in another manager 200 miles away from me, from where I live, it would have been a risk, because they're ill one day or they decide they don't want to do it anymore. I can't do both. So and it coincided with having a child as well. So that kind of changes things a little bit, because of course you don't have the time and the freedom that you used to just get in a car on a Saturday morning and go cover a shift. I couldn't do that anymore to a certain extent. So just that was the real decision point where I said, actually, I'm going to close this one down and I'm going to go into franchising instead. I still want more branches, but I don't want to run them all myself. And that was tough, because at the time, closing a branch feels like a failure, even if it's your choice, because and you worry about the perception outside of, the business for that. But it was the right decision. I could have carried that branch on. We could have either renewed the lease or gone somewhere else, but I'm glad I did it now. It was definitely the right lifestyle decision for me, essentially. And it led to the franchising taking off, because then I could truly say, this is the way I should grow my business.
So I'd really like to explore that, that focus on franchising as your scale up strategy. And I think that's fascinating as well, that you had a trial branch essentially. So you were almost piloting it as a franchise, I suppose, in some respects, operating at arm's length from the main thing. So that's excellent. Can I just go back to the people side of things first? What have you found worked for you in terms of finding the right people and I don't know, involving them, getting them engaged as part of the culture and everything? Hey, what have you found worked for you in that side of things?
Well, by no means got it completely right yet. I think you're constantly growing in your own business when you're the manager as well, because you have to kind of learn how to manage people. So I would say for me, I always try and recruit on personality attributes and traits necessarily over practical skills, because for me they are absolutely crucial to carrying out the job and keeping the standards. So you need someone who's conscientious and people who care and just have that integrity about them to care whether that gritty job gets done by the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't, the venue doesn't look as pleasant as it should, or it's not as safe and hygienic as it should be. You need people who care and people who enjoy being with other people as well. So it really is those traits and attributes in an individual that you can't teach. That's what I've learned over the years. I can teach someone who's never even lifted a comb how to do beautiful vintage hair. You can do it. You can teach anyone those kind of practical skills. And I have done it in the past. I taught myself. I didn't have a clue as a project manager. I'd never had any aspirations to be a hairdresser, and just taught myself as a means to an end, because if I taught myself how to do it, I knew I could take on an internal team and teach them. If I never taught myself, I would always be subcontracting. I would always be relying on an external skill set. And that's how I've done everything in my business. I've taught myself photography, making catering and food and designing menus, everything, because if I've done it, I can teach other people. I know the standards, I know the job inside out. And my team can never then come to me and say, that's not possible, or it takes longer to do that, Lynsey, which is a common one we all have, isn't it? And I say, well, I did it for 10 years. So I know that's how long it takes. And you have to remind them of that, especially with new team members who've never seen me doing the job. They've always seen me as the more senior manager, and I have to remind them, like, oh no, I was out every weekend doing hair and makeup and events and photos, and I've done it. So I think, and showing by doing, I suppose, goes along with that. But yeah, absolutely. I think there's certain things like common sense and that you can't teach. You absolutely, I've never had any success in teaching it or trying to in the end. So that tends to be how I recruit now. And it doesn't always work, and we all, even to this day, sometimes you end up picking the wrong person, or they picked the wrong company that wasn't right for them. But I'd say we're mostly there now. And
I think that's great. And of course, also you've got the fact that if you've got people that care, it's extremely visible when a customer's had a good event as well or not, isn't it? So you've yeah. So if people are caring, I'm imagining it's very rewarding to run a fantastic event.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I look for, especially in our more sort of supervisory management type roles, and anyone, like who looks after customer bookings and things, is that they need to get that high from knowing, from seeing that customer. So they walk, we get it all the time, and it's such a lovely part of our business where someone will walk in and they always have a story a lot of the time. People will book to come and have a photo shoot, and we call them, in some of our marketing, we call them makeovers for the soul, because it can sound like very superficial to have your hair and makeup done and stand in front of a camera, but it's actually quite a massive process for some. And I say women because they're our customer base. It probably is for men as well, but it's my experience, it's women. And they go through a journey while they're in our venue where they gain confidence, they see themselves in a new light, and they're massive. And then we get people give us the most beautiful reviews because they say, I've never felt so amazing in my entire life. Your team made me feel. And that's what I always say to the team. Our strapline internally, we don't use it externally, but our mission statement, whatever vision statement that I use internally, is that everything we do is we have to change the way people feel. That's what we do, and that comes first. We're not above being a salon or serving a milkshake or doing anything else. We change the way people feel, and if you do that for the positive, obviously, then you solve everything. So yeah, that's it. And I think the team members that get the joy from that and love to then WhatsApp me. I can tell on Saturday, we just had a customer and they had the most amazing time, and they're excited to tell me that story. You can't, that really is a very, very valuable asset in the business. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's that, I think it was Maya Angelou, wasn't it, that said something along the lines of people will always, they'll always forget what you told them or taught them or something, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So
yeah 100%.
Absolutely brilliant, good. So franchising then, what made you come to the conclusion that franchising was the way for you to scale the business?
I did take a while to get to that. And when I first started talking about it, I remember having conversations with my sister about it. And we were like, being the branch owners and the kind of core of the business between us, we were like, could someone else do this? Could we trust someone else to run these branches? So there was a difficult decision to kind of take that leap. And certainly it's not been a smooth journey. I've had other franchises that are no longer with us for various reasons, but it is not, I picked the wrong person for my first franchise without a shadow of a doubt. So, it's not been an easy journey, but it was logical for me as well because of the background I came from. I'm very process driven, and a lot of the business was sort of written out in a process type way as well. So transitioning that into a franchise manual and having a business that could be repeatable and done by other people, I felt that. And interestingly, when I spoke to franchise consultants at the start of that decision, who I didn't in the end use, I did it all myself in the end, but I had those conversations with them, and they were like, oh, I don't know whether this is franchisable because it seems like it's about you, and your sister's branch is her branch and your branch is you, and it's, could someone else do that? And I felt like, well, I'm not going to try and convince you of that or not. I know that actually, it's not, you do have to have a figurehead for that branch who is that personality who will care for every customer, and that's certainly, like I say, the challenge of replacing me as a manager. But that's what I look for in the franchisee, and I found it. So yeah, I think once I've gotten over that hump and understood it, it was just a really, really logical next step for growing the business, because for me, stopping at one branch wasn't an option because I am ambitious and I did want to grow it. But the thought of having and running other branches of my own across the country, it's just something that I did not want to do on a personal level. It's a lot. It's one thing managing one branch and one team. Multiplying that was not something I wanted to do. It's a lot of work.
I can imagine, and yeah, I would concur with what you're saying there as well. Is that the success of every branch, it's going to be dependent on the personality as much as anything of the person running that, and the fact that they're absolutely as invested in it as you are, essentially, and a manager that you're paying on a salary or whatever else, it's going to be hard to get that same motivation as a business owner. I would imagine. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's also the element of risk. The risk is actually less for me, because if I open my own branch, and yes, I can technically have more control over that. However, if a manager or a team, something's going wrong in that, they can, like, a manager can just leave at any point and I'm left high and dry with that branch. The franchisee is committed on a personal, financial, and every level to that, and that commitment that they put in is what you need to make it a success. And they're all in and I'm all in, and that's what it needs to be. And you need, my franchisee that I have now, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this because she's just done an amazing job. She came on board late 2019, signed the contract with me, and she was due to open April 2020. I mean, can you imagine worse timing? And I've always said to her, oh, Anna, I promise you, if I'd have known what was coming around the corner, I'd have never taken you on, because I couldn't have done that. And she has shown every sign of grit and tenacity, and she will not quit. She has got through the first 2 years in her business, not even being able to open for most of it, and she's just thriving now, and the branch is doing amazing, and she's doing amazing, and her mindset's great. And it's God, but that's, so I always say to her, I just need 10 Annas, I need that personality, because if she hadn't had that, and certainly there was other people in the picture at the start who did not get through it, then it takes a very special kind of person. And to me, she's got that on. It's being an entrepreneur, isn't it? We just don't give up. And if you're the kind of person who has a bit of a track record quitting things, that's always what I'll try and wheedle out in the franchise recruitment process, because you just can't have people who try something and let it go again. They've got to be really tenacious.
Interesting. So lots of things to unpack there. They've got lots of questions. So let's go back to, because you said something that interested me as well earlier on, in terms of you obviously talked to some franchise consultants, but you ended up doing it yourself. So anything there that you would either do differently, or some of the reasons maybe why you chose that? And you mentioned already, it might be that maybe they just didn't get it, but what were some of the reasons you decided to do it yourself?
A lot of they didn't get it. A lot of the consultants I found were very traditional business type people, and they just did not, like you say, I didn't maybe truly get what I was doing, and I didn't feel like a lot of synergy with any of the ones I spoke to. So to hand over the kind of cash that they were asking just seemed bonkers to me. And then I think it was really because of the background I came from that I felt prepared to set my business up as a franchise. I think franchising consultants have an amazing place for people who, for example, are incredibly creative, and they've built a business off of a creative skill, and then don't necessarily have the other side of it, which is the processes and the business kind of thing. Whereas actually I've made myself do the creative stuff in order to teach it to other people. But really, that's my passion, the business end of things. And that's where I'm totally nerdy and love that. And I did do a business degree. That was what I did when I was like 19. Has it taught me anything reality business? Probably not. I could have probably more about economics and things like that, but not really about entrepreneurship. But maybe I did take some from that. But having been in a job where project management certainly gave me a lot of transferable skills for that process, but business process re-engineering did, because my job used to be to go into other teams and see whether we could make them more efficient, we could streamline that process, whether people were productive enough, and all of those kind of things. And then managing the change process once you implemented those changes and that sort of thing. And that whole process is a lot of building a business model. From we get to do it from scratch without having to iron out previous problems. And I worked in local government, so believe me, making change in local government was emotional. So for me, I enjoyed that franchise process. That's not been my biggest challenge, is turning it into the franchising. It's actually been something that I've really, really enjoyed doing, because it's just kind of how my brain works. Other things I found more challenging. Really.
Yes, because I think a lot of people listening will be thinking, crikey, I've seen a franchise manager in the past or something, and I've just imagined this enormous task of trying to capture all of the business processes into a document. But if you,
it's a massive job.
And how did you go about getting the legals? Did you hire external advice to get your legal agreements done?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was one of the things that I actually invested quite heavily in. I went with BFA, which is British Franchise Association. I went with a recommended one who happened to be local, but he really is at the top of his game in it. He did an absolutely amazing job with a very, very robust contract, which has paid for itself already in terms of, like I say, the first franchise branch that did not work out, that contract protected me.
Great. So
10 times over. So, I mean, I know you can go online and download a template. If anyone out there's listening that wants a franchise, I just beg of you, don't do it. It's tempting, but mine cost me quite a lot, but it was absolutely the right investment. In fact, investing in that over consultants was the best decision for me. And it cost a third of what the consultants would have charged. So, to do that whole process for me. So yeah, it was absolutely key. And he gave me so much advice as well as part, when you sit down and write a whole contract, of course he's got a basic template, but because my business model is so unique, he really had to go into ifs and buts of all these different service provisions and service standards and all that kind of thing, which isn't, maybe a cookie cutter kind of typical, cleaning franchise or coffee franchise or something like that. So I learned a lot about how to do a lot of the franchising process by those conversations. So it was invaluable. Yeah.
Excellent. No, very good advice. And you mentioned that was your biggest challenge, and it sounds, you've mentioned a couple of times now as well, it sounds like your first franchisee was maybe one of your challenges. So let's explore that a little bit then. What lessons did you take away from that?
I got very excited that somebody wanted to buy it. Is the honest truth. And having spoken to other people who franchise now, I feel a lot better about it, because they say, I don't know what the statistic is, I'll make it up, but it's a high percentage of every franchise network's first few fail, because it's such a steep learning curve. And I picked an individual that, if I look back now, hand on heart, I can see the red flags there during the recruitment process. The recruitment process was too short. What I do now is really string it out a bit, because actually you're testing their commitment and grit and all of that. So that there's all of that. Yeah.
What were some of the red flags then, that looking back?
I think again, like their commitment and focus, possibly. So the big problem that happened with this one, she went AWOL essentially. I started to get customer call saying I was stood outside the branch for my appointment and no one's there, kind of thing. So I was like, okay. And then it kind of, would cycle into these weird elaborate lies. And personality wise, my goodness, she was a very unique individual, and I've never experienced anything like it. And I know now the types of questions that I would hope would wheedle out some of those red flags. And I think I've learned that. And saying I learned it from that painful experience. And it was painful, because I had to go down the legal route with her to exit her, because she was just utterly head in the sand about it all, would not acknowledge that it was going wrong. And I said, I can't let you continue to be a franchise if you're not there and you're not answering and you're getting customer complaints, and we can't let that. She actually still continued, even after I had exited her, she did continue operating for 3 months. I had to try and get her ironically, she was operating more after I got rid of her. I laugh about it now, but it really felt like a failure at the time. It knocked my confidence so significantly, because I thought I'd failed in the franchise thing. And I thought, how will anyone buy one off me after this? Because the first question I would ask is, why is that one still not open? Obviously the business model, you blame it on that, but it wasn't that. And I was just, and it coincided with me going on to a business accelerator program and having some really intensive coaching over 6 months and crying a lot, to be honest. I was like, I can't do this. And then sort of pulling me together and being like, you just got to get out there. And then I thought, you know what, I didn't do any more promotions, try and sell anymore. And I thought, I can't stop here. I can't, I've done all the hard work. I've got to get over myself and this perceived failure and try and sell it again. And if they ask me those difficult questions, I'm just going to be honest about it to protect that individual's identity. I'd never, do anything to jeopardize that, but be honest about what happened. And I decided, and I went and sought out some advice. I just contacted any experts I could find in the field on franchising. And I happened to come across this one guy who said, oh my God, you've just given up. And I said, well, I haven't given up, I want to. And he said, I'll mentor you if you like. And he was kind enough to mentor me. And I can owe a lot to him, because he just was like, got me back on track, gave me confidence. And then he was the one who'd been in franchising for years. And he was like, everyone's franchise fails first. And I was like, just needed to hear that from someone. And he was like, don't worry about it, And to me, it was like the whole world I'd failed at my venture, And then got back on track, started advertising it again, and that was it. Went from there and found Anna, and then started to get momentum, and then COVID hit, of course, and I couldn't sell franchises during the COVID. We're a hospitality business at the end of the day. I had to wait to stabilize again. So I only started advertising them again January 2022. So, unfortunately, it's been a slow process from when I gained that confidence back and got another one on board. But saying that, I've now got others in the pipeline, one who's signed up deposit wise, and so we're pretty sure that's going ahead, and other things in the pipeline. So I feel back to confident with it again, because Anna's been, and I always thank Anna for giving me the confidence as well to show me that it could work, because she's been so brilliant and gotten through possibly the toughest time ever to start a business.
No, she sounds amazing. So what's working for you then in terms of finding potential prospects for franchisees? What sort of things working there?
So interestingly enough, again, which is the process I had with the franchise consultants, was they very much, there's a blueprint, isn't there, for how to do franchising, and it always felt a little bit too corporate to me, the way it was being recommended. And I went and did my research and got a load of franchise information packs, and initially followed that format. But it, I sold the one, but I wasn't getting any more interest, and I wasn't engaging. And having the conversation with the mentor and also other people, I really started to realize, and coinciding with that process was, paying all of these major franchise platforms lots of money to advertise my franchise opportunity. And I would get the leads, but they were not of quality to me because of my niche business and what I'm looking for. So he very much steered me more down the line of, you've got your franchisees right there in your mailing list and your following. Look how passionate they are about your business. That's who you need. So I stopped advertising it financially led type hooks, if you like, which is more traditionally how other franchises would say, if you look at the top of it, it's like, you'll make X, Y, and Z, and this is blah, blah, blah. That's at the bottom of my pack now. I tell stories. That's how I sell franchises. I tell my story. I tell my story of failures. I tell them how I was bullied in a job and how I got out of that. I told them how I quit my job and took a leap. And I tell every story about my journey, and it works, because everyone who's currently in the pipeline, and certainly Anna, have all given me the feedback that they read those stories and it felt like them, like right now. So I'm like, I know what it feels like to be in a job where you're screaming and you're good at it, but it's not you. And this is what I did. And this is what, and I think when you're really, really honest and transparent, and tell people like what went wrong and what went right and why you think you're good at what you do and what you need to learn, they get it. And it's people, it's human, and it's that connection that sold them. And I just, for me, don't follow the same route that anyone would probably advise on how you sell a franchise, but our business is different to a lot of other businesses, so we do it our way.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
I love that. I think I could talk to you for hours, Lynsey, but I'm conscious that of your time and everybody's listening as well. So we probably should start to wrap this up. But it's absolutely fascinating. I could literally, I've still got lots of questions I'd like to ask you, but one or two that I'd like to close off with, if we can. So, firstly, if you and I are having this conversation in 5 years' time, what does success look like for you? what has to have happened in those 5 years?
Yeah, so success for me is definitely having a complete franchise network. So, 10 to 15 is complete to me, because we're niche and we have large territories. So, that's a comfortable number for me. And included in that is not being the owner and operator of my own branch. That branch is passed on to another franchisee. So I truly am a franchisor, and and have the time and space to do that. And also, my lifestyle is I manage and not manage, mentor and support and grow and all of the franchisees and help them nurture their business, and then focus on my cosmetics range and growing that. That's the 5-year goal. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, fantastic. Very good. If there was one thing that you'd do differently, what would it be?
Well, that's a really interesting one. I mean, no, probably a lot of things. I mean, a lot of the time it's around people maybe choosing the wrong people to work with or hire sometimes has caused problems, and learning about how to be a better recruiter, a better manager. That's probably where I feel like I could have done better over the years. And you learn by doing with that, and sometimes it's quite painful, but you have to get through it. So I think it'd probably be more around that kind of side of it. But equally, it kind of serves well in franchising to kind of know where your failures have been and learn from them, because that's what you're saying to your franchisees is like, okay, you're going to pay the franchise fee up front, but you're paying me that franchise fee for my 10 years of mistakes. You're not going to make them, because I'm not going to let you make them. And some of them are expensive mistakes. You take on an expensive person who didn't work out, you spend a lot on marketing and get nothing back from it. I've tried and tested all of that, so it's led me to where I am now. And it's not, I think the Leeds branch and the first franchise branch and the emotions and failure I felt around that won't happen to me again, even if something does in inverted commas fail, because I've learned now how to cope with that failure. So I think it's totally a different mindset for me now.
Excellent. Brilliant. And are there any resources, whether that be books, podcasts, apps, anything that you found particularly useful in your business that you'd recommend to others?
For me, it's being part of business communities, 100%. So reaching out and trying to find, and there's so many free ones out there. I mean, I presume it's okay if I mention them by name and all that, but of course, I know yourselves through support I've had through the Growth Hub in Birmingham and Help with Bismarck and amazing programs like that. I've done the Aston University Leadership Program. I've done NatWest Accelerator, which I'm still in now, and they've been incredible. And you get amazing teaching and free access to coaching and mentoring, which is just so valuable. But for me, the friendships I've made through those, and then we've kind of siphoned off over the years, and we've got our own mastermind groups, and we support each other. We have a WhatsApp, which is focused on our businesses, and we socialise, and we have idea beers. That's what we call them. But it's a social, it's a night out, but we're talking business, But so that kind of thing, it for me has been massive, because it's so lonely sometimes being an entrepreneur, and everything's on your shoulders, everything, and you're the ultimate decision maker, and to do that on your own. And I wouldn't say necessarily that, some people have brilliant business partnerships. For me, it's not necessarily the way I would work well, but people who understand what you're going through. There's nothing like another entrepreneur who you can be like, oh, I've got this problem with a staff member. And people who don't have that experience might say to you, I'll do X, Y, and Z, but they don't really understand. I can't just let go of them, because otherwise no one's running my event on Saturday, that kind of thing, So, it's complicated, and they understand that complexity. So that would be it for me, in terms of resources,
It's fantastic. And if somebody would like to get hold of you or find out more about Le Keux, what's the best way for them to do that, Lynsey?
I think probably the best way is just go to lekeux.com. Nice and simple, LEKEUX.com, and on there you'd find everything that we do and contact details for the business and myself and franchising and everything.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Lynsey. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. As I say, I'm fascinated by what you do. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you very much indeed for coming on ScaleUp Radio.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Don't forget to take a look at www.bizsmarts.co.uk to access a great range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey. So that's bizsmarts.co.uk, which is bizsmarts.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.